Let's get to beyond this truce and ceasefire, longer term, okay? First of all, we need to be very clear on one thing. Having as a baseline that Israel should not exist as a country is not going to lead to long-term peace. It's just not. Now, the top leader of Hamas has declared that he's dared Israel to launch a ground invasion, and on every time we talk about negotiations, Hamas refuses to even accept that Israel has a right to exist. Now, we can have discussions over how Israel was created. We can have discussions over how the United States was created via a land grab from the Native Americans and a huge slaughter. However, if when talking about what should happen next in Afghanistan with the U.S. military, we had factions that were simply saying, hold on a second, Afghanistan, the U.S. shouldn't even exist. They took the land from the Native Americans. We would not have progress. So pragmatically speaking, the United Nations has determined that Israel as a country exists. Maybe some people feel it is more relevant to question that because it's more recent in history, not enough years have passed. But I can guarantee you, and you guys can disagree, we're not going to see progress if we can't at least put that part of the argument aside.
Right, regardless of your beliefs. I mean, the general consensus across the globe is that Israel is a country, and it exists where it stands, and that's not going to change.
Right. Most countries exist because of so-called land grabs and violence. The fact that the Israeli one happened more recently is not going to get peace there any sooner if we continue to hear, well, Israel just shouldn't exist. So that's the precondition for negotiation. Should we look at uncreating the United States? How far is this going to go? In World War II, should we have questioned whether the Allies really were valid based on how those countries were created? We're just not going to get anywhere. We need to think pragmatically. Now, the Palestinian side is not well served by Hamas. If we want to get to the logistics, we are not going to get too far. As I mentioned, Hamas does not even recognize that Israel exists, essentially. As NPR reported, support for Hamas from Palestinians is continuing to decrease. Hamas has praised Osama bin Laden as a holy warrior. Hamas mourned the death of Osama bin Laden. Hamas's rockets have Iran's fingerprints all over them. The longer range rockets are Iran manufactured and being shipped in through Egypt. So what would it take pragmatically for the Palestinians to have representation from someone serving their interests better than Hamas? I don't know what it would take.
It would take the fall of Hamas.
Natan, what's your thought?
I think what we need, if Israel is going to negotiate a peace with Hamas, in other words, if Hamas stays in power, Hamas needs to ask for, in other words, it needs to accept no preconditions to a negotiation, and Israel needs to accept sitting down with Hamas, even if before the negotiations begin, Hamas may or may not be in favor of an Israeli Jewish state. So they need to just sit down with no preconditions.
We need some concessions here from both sides. And ladies and gentlemen, this needs to happen if we're going to have so-called peace. Now, many people will say the only barrier to peace is Israel, or the only barrier to peace is Hamas. Both would be completely wrong on this issue, because you can make a case for saying which came first. In other words, Israel started an oppression of Gaza, and that's why all the rockets are coming, which is why Israel is then defending itself. Others would say Hamas has said that Israel does not have a right to exist and that they will continue until Israel is destroyed, and that is the catalyst. At this point, we need to get both sides to say, let's have a negotiation. We need to get people at the table. Now, I am not against Hillary. The idea, there was controversy earlier today over whether Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton would be the best person to go over there and negotiate. Or maybe it would be Bill Richardson, the former New Mexico governor who has a lot of experience with these issues. He's been to North Korea numerous times in negotiations there. I don't know who the third parties need to be. What I know, and again, disagree, opportunity for both of you, both sides need to make some concessions if we're going to move forward at all.
Look, the problem, I'm going to come out and say I believe the problem is Hamas, because I do not believe that Hamas wants peace. Hamas wants land. And Hamas is using very specific tactics like firing rockets out of dense civilian areas, because when rockets come back and kill those civilians, they use that as a tool to say, look what Israel's doing. I do not think the Palestinians as a whole may very well want peace, but I do not believe.
No question.
I do not believe that Hamas does. So
Well,
it's a good thing that popularity for Hamas is on the decline.
Right, and we have to also consider this idea that we're not going to also get anywhere by suggesting that the solution is more escalation. Do you guys agree with that? In other words, some people would sit back and say what we need is either Hamas to get some much better rockets from Iran through Egypt and really make a dent in Israel, or we need Israel to use the firepower we know they have and simply wipe out Gaza. Okay? I don't think that's a solution. I don't think an escalation is a solution here.
Not at all. What Israel is doing is they are trying to destroy the rocket sites that they believe are currently threatening Israel. If Israel wanted to, in the snap of a finger, they could wipe out all of Gaza. They could wipe out all the Palestinians in a flash. They haven't done that. So I think people need to take that into consideration. Obviously, the Israelis also do not want bloodshed.
Natan, last thing on this. Discussions of who God promised different pieces of land to, I believe that has no place in negotiations going forward. Am I right? And is it reasonable to think we could get to that point?
Yes, you're right. And also, the international community does not respect or even really acknowledge those types of arguments. They only acknowledge the political arguments that will lead to a peace between two sides and two civilian populations. So you can use those arguments, but those arguments are not going to be acknowledged or used in the actual negotiations.
Agreed. So that's where we're at right now. We're going to see this truce, which of course, as we know, how long will it last? We don't know. We need to move to longer term solutions. We'll continue talking about it. Send in your emails. Tell me where I'm wrong. Say where Lewis is wrong or Natan is wrong. Let's think about this critically here and not jump to say any time that we are hearing blame for anything placed solely on one side, I'm probably going to disagree with you.
All right.
That's just the reality.
Right. I mean, I think for today we've gone as far as we can go.